So you're talking about bringing a functional focus to Genesis 1 and that account, and not a material focus. A functional focus, does that help us answer questions like, what was the source of light before day 4 when God created the sun?
I think that it very much does. If we recognize that the text is dealing with the important functions first, days 1, 2, and 3, and then it goes on to talk about the functionaries, then we realize that this is not a material sequence in which God brought things into being, and therefore the text is not saying that there was light before the sun. It's rather focusing on time as an important function and
Right,
light's
okay.
involvement in that.
If that is the case, though, if we're focused on functions, which is really interesting, can we still talk about material origins? Can we, isn't that in there too?
Certainly we can talk about material origins, but we can't assume that the biblical author was interested.
But doesn't
in
it
material
sound like, when
origins.
you read Genesis 1, doesn't it sound a lot like God is making stuff?
It may sound like that to us, but that's because we approach it with that idea in mind.
Okay.
In other words, we've already got that in our frame of reference.
Right,
And
because it was in my children's Bible.
That's
It
right.
was things,
Yeah.
animals were popping up out of the ground.
And of course, God did make all the material stuff. I'm just saying that's not what this part of the story is focusing on.
What do you mean by functioning in the sense of, the sun on day 4? What was it there before day 4? And if so, was it not functioning? Was it not a burning ball of gas? Was it not emitting light? What does it mean that now the sun is functioning?
Well,
Was it not plugged in? Was it hooked up, but the switch was off?
Well, remember when we talk about functioning in the way that I'm trying to describe in the biblical text, we're talking about functioning in an ordered system, having a role and a purpose in an ordered system, and that ordered system is focused on a place for people. If people aren't there, it's not functioning.
So you're saying it's all about us.
It's all about us because that's how God made it to be all about us. But it's all about us in the important way that it's His place.
And how does the sun then gain that role on day 4? What happens?
Well, it's identified and proclaimed to be that. And that's
God speaks.
right. And the minute He identifies that role in this ordered system with people in it, then it exists in that way. That doesn't mean it didn't exist as a burning ball of gas for who knows how long before that, but
Okay.
it wasn't functioning for people. And notice that's what the text says. It's for signs, seasons, days, and years. These are functions for people. So it's not talking about scientific functions. It's talking about the functions that it has for us.
One of the criticisms that has been leveled against you and your book is that this is never what the church thought. Okay, throughout history, we never find a time where anyone taught this in the church. So are you saying that we've all been wrong up until now?
That's certainly not what I want to be heard saying. Before we get to the Enlightenment, we find church fathers and Jewish authors who talk about the functional aspect and recognize that. And so we do find that kind of discussion early on. They're not using the same kind of terminology that I'm using, but they're talking about creation in those terms. Certainly by the time we pass the Enlightenment, things have taken a radical turn in another direction, and materialism and naturalism all become very important.
So you're saying the material focus really was emphasized and came to the front in the Enlightenment.
Right. It's not that it didn't exist before, but it came to the front there. Remember also that the earliest documents that we have discussing all of this in relation to the church and our doctrine are already past the Hellenistic period. And that is, it's not the ancient world anymore, it's the Greco-Roman world.
Right.
And therefore, the rabbis and the earliest church fathers, even the intertestamental literature, are dealing with a Greco-Roman world, a Hellenistic world.
And do we have information that they didn't have? Do we know things that they didn't know?
That's what archaeology has provided. See, and that's how we can get back into that world in ways that until the last 100 years or so, no one was able to do, because now we have documents, literature from the ancient world that give us a window into that way of thinking.
It's like a time machine.
Almost.